Whether it's rising from third-degree burns to compete against your nemesis, or having the FIA involved to secure your win, Formula One has seen some intense on- and off-track battles between rivals, and these are the top 5, starting with James Hunt and Niki Lauda. Now, as surprising as it may sound, the two weren't rivals from the start. I mean, they were so close that they used to live together.
I have as much as you can have to a racing car. I think you should know as well that sometimes there are things happening which you can't calculate, which you can't think of, and they happen. Having had an accident is that when you have an accident, physically you can be alright fairly quick if you have good doctors, but mentally is the problem. To force yourself to get back to the style of driving you did before, that means to reach all the limit or sometimes even be able to go over the limit.
He's up and about and breathing and talking and happy. He might have broken his cheekbone or something, but otherwise he's fine.
So it makes me wonder how two roommates ended up becoming each other's rivals. The answer is simple: the World Drivers' Championship. So, in 1975, Lauda dominated the first 6 races and stole 4 wins from Hunt. But Hunt is a strong fella. He still fought for 2 wins even though Lauda had his reach on them. But that was until Lauda's miraculous crash, where he lost control of his race car and crashed into the wall, which erupted into a fireball. But no pain could have burned more than Hunt ganging up on his position. So even though he was recovering from third-degree burns and missing eyelids, their rivalry was so fierce that Lauda felt the need to come back to the racetrack, all bandaged up and ready to race, or more so, to beat James Hunt. But as the last race of the season approached, there was only a 3-point gap between the two, and when James Hunt won the Japanese Grand Prix, he also won the 1976 title over his rival. But Lauda didn't let that push him down. I mean, if he can rise and become the vice world champion after such a fatal incident, then driving in better conditions is a piece of cake. And so, he bounced back to win that world championship in 1977. Speaking of world championships though, that title gets tossed around a lot, right? Just ask Michael Schumacher and Mika Hakkinen. Like, these two used to play tug of war with that thing, because even with all that fame and glory, Hakkinen was Schumacher's sternest challenger, and while both of them competed fiercely, they never let the rivalry off the track, something we don't get to see much in the F1 world. Now, there must be some kind of connection between Lauda and Schumacher, because like Lauda, Schumacher didn't let his leg fracture set him back. Like, yeah, he did need to pause for 6 races, but when he returned, he managed to take pole position in Malaysia. But by then, the gap between them was uncontestable, so Hakkinen had the crown, until Schumacher took his revenge in the 2000 season, and probably not just on Hakkinen, but the entire grid, because he dominated for the next few years, whereas his primary rival said bye-bye to the sport in 2001. And maybe F1 racers like to end their careers by the end of their prime time, just like Nico Rosberg, who left F1 after competing against Lewis Hamilton, from racing in karts to racing in Formula One cars. Both of them grew up, and on friendly terms too, but all of that changed when they were paired up in 2013, and it's always gonna sting if your teammate in equal machinery finishes ahead of you, something that Rosberg can relate to on a personal level, because even though Rosberg had more experience, Hamilton was the more tactical driver. He had perfected the art of tire preservation, driving in wet weather, and just overall racecraft, and all of that paid up as he won 2 consecutive titles over Rosberg. And oh boy, Rosberg's ego couldn't take those hits. He gave his all in the 2016 season and took advantage of Hamilton's weak spots until he got that championship trophy. Mission accomplished, I guess, because after that, Rosberg retired, as if his only goal was to beat Hamilton, and that is something many drivers resonate with.
How did you do
Because
it?
of the battle that we've had and everything, and so no, first of all, I just wrote a message before the actual announcement, and then afterwards we got together and had a chat about it, and just went through a few stuff, and it was a nice conversation, and I'm open to finding our way, you know, and even having a good relationship again in the future. Why not?
Like Max Verstappen still having it out for Lewis Hamilton. And when I saw the 2021 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix finish, I felt the tension myself. So what happened was that this was the final tiebreaker race. One small slip from any one of the two would have caused them their entire battle. But the thing is, none of them really slipped here, because right before the last lap, Nicholas Latifi crashed into the wall at turn 14. So a safety car was deployed on the track. This caused the race to slow down and cars were allowed to box, something Verstappen took an advantage of. There were 5 lapped cars between Verstappen and Hamilton, and these cars weren't allowed to overtake and unlap themselves before Max went to box. But guess what? After Verstappen got out of the pits, the debris from the accident was cleared up, so by rule, all the lapped cars were allowed to overtake. But here, only the 5 cars in between the 2 championship leaders were told to unlap themselves, which caused the gap between Hamilton and Verstappen to close up. And not just that, Verstappen was on Hamilton's rear with fresh tires, and that meant more grip. And while Hamilton put up a great fight, Verstappen ended up overtaking his Mercedes to clutch his first World Championship title. Now that is one forced rivalry that still causes a stir when talked about, but the final one on our list caused tension to live on for years. And I'm talking about the Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna rivalry. Now this tug of war began when both of them were paired as teammates in McLaren, and people might think, oh, they're performing well, so they must have great driver chemistry together, right? Wrong. Prost and Senna became bitter rivals once they were paired together. I mean, if you have 2 of the best racers in the world on the same team, none of them would be willing to let the other one pass and win the race. And relations were even worse because one of the racers was given preferential treatment. That's right, Prost was McLaren's favorite child until Senna threw him off of his throne. And once he started winning races from the back of the grid, it was natural for Prost to question how Senna had so much more pace than him. So the Frenchman accused McLaren of giving Senna better suited cars and prioritizing him for the championship wins. And oh boy, that wasn't the end of the Prost-Senna rivalry. In fact, it had just started, because in the following 1989 season in Japan, tension was already brewing, and Senna, well, he made a move on Prost, which caused him to crash. And while Prost jumped out of his car, swearing at his teammate, Senna just reversed and joined back the race as if nothing even happened. But then again, FIA does exist, and they did not hesitate to disqualify Senna, giving Prost the championship title. And that, guys, was the end of their partnership. But gee, Senna had it out for Prost, because even when the Frenchman went to Ferrari, the 1990 season was probably the most intense chapter of their rivalry. Now, it was the last race of the season. Both of them were neck and neck for the crown, so Senna would have secured the crown if he won, or if both of them crashed. And when option A was not within reach, you guessed it, Senna made an aggressive move to overtake Prost, but he collided with his nemesis and got both of them disqualified. And since none of them finished the race, Senna took the crown, as well as Prost's comment of Senna being a man without honor. But even after all that racetrack politics, when Senna got into that final accident which cost him his life, Prost ended up being one of the men to carry Senna to his resting place. Well folks, those were some of the most intense F1 rivalries to exist. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.